Hello, BookTube. I have a Friday MegaStuff video for you here, a collection of a lot of little bits and pieces. I was going to have a Friday Reads and a Friday Tag video in addition, but I don't think I'm going to. I think it's just going to be this video and your Daily Penguin. And I have a few bits and pieces, including one piece of mail, one package. I wanted to start off with a tech update. And the reason why my eyes are wandering all over creation here is because I'm filming this on my iPhone, which is an old iPhone. My iPhone 7 bricked on me, just up and died, gave up the ghost. No way to revive it that I know of. And I wanted an iPhone, so I was immediately presented with the not entirely unpleasant necessity of picking a new iPhone. And I decided rather than to do that, rather than to pick a new iPhone, I would pick an old iPhone. Because I had an iPhone 6 that the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the iPhone 6 is a tiny thing compared to the iPhone 7. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I liked the fact that I could hold the iPhone 6 easily in one hand, that I could manipulate it entirely in one hand. If I wanted to hold my iPhone 7 in one hand, I could not text on it, not comfortably. Many's the time it fell right out of my hand because it's encroaching into the middle ground between a phone and a tablet. So I decided intentionally that if I was going to pay money for a refurbished, used iPhone, that I would just get another iPhone 6, only with a lot more storage. This is the reason that I moved out of the original iPhone 6 is that it has like 15 gigs of storage, so there's no way for me to film videos on it. I have to film a video, then upload it to some other machine, and then delete it, and then delete it from memory, and then film another one. That's no way to be. So I got an iPhone 6 with a lot of memory, and was filming videos on that, but that presented a problem, because I don't like to read on my iPhone. I certainly can write documents on my iPhone. I can, and it's nice to have that as a backup. The iPhone can actually do everything, but I don't like to. And so that required that I have another machine, or more than one machine. And I would really like to have only one machine. I'd like to have one device to rule them all. And the reason that I'm filming on this iPhone today is to show you what I'm increasingly thinking is that device. I haven't shown it to you since I got it. I hauled it in the mail for you, but I've since put it together and I've been using it. And it's this. It's my my new 2019 entry-level iPad. I always smirk at that. Only Apple would have the cheek to call something entry-level. It costs as much as this thing does. It has an old processor, the same processor that was in that iPhone 7, but a bigger screen than than all the other iPads that I have by just a bit, and more RAM and a lot more memory. And in addition to that iPad, I also got this, the smart keyboard case that has here. There's a sleep and wake cover, and then the cover unfolds to a keyboard, and then the iPad locks into the keyboard like that, for what turns out to be heavenly typing. Just heavenly. And the whole thing is just that. And I wanted to show it to you because I did a little math, because when I get an iPad, I reconfigure it completely, just completely. It takes about an hour to do. I reconfigure it completely. I go into all the settings, down deep into the bowels of the settings, make sure the device is not listening to me, disable Siri, disable locations, disable anything that gives it information that I don't decide to give it. So you go in and disable all of those permissions, turn all of that off. If your device is set to give you a notification, that means your device has the ability to reach out and contact you. It shouldn't. It absolutely shouldn't. You shouldn't give your devices the ability to reach out and contact you. Or you're at their beck and call instead of the other way around. So I had to go in and do all of that reformatting, just everything, just all the reformatting in the world. And while I'm in that sort of mode for that hour, I also, there's a place for you to rename your iPad, to give your iPad a name. And I've had so many that I naturally thought, well, I should name this one to distinguish it from all the others. And then I looked at my iPads, and I figured, what am I going to name this? And I thought, because the technical name for this, for Apple, is just iPad. All the other iPads have designations, the iPad mini, the iPad Air, the iPad Pro. This is the one that doesn't. if people didn't differentiate a 2019 entry-level iPad, then they wouldn't know how to call it anything. But I looked at my technology, and I have an original first-generation iPad. I have 2 second-generation iPads. I have 2 iPad minis and 2 iPad Airs. Or no, I might have 1 iPad mini. So it's an original iPad, 2 second-generation iPads, an iPad mini, yes, and 2 iPad Airs. Or no, 1 iPad Air. And when I got to that number, I might have done it wrong for this video. I'm really not feeling all that well. But when I got to that number, I realized that this would be my 7th iPad. So this is now, of course, called 7 of 9. so I have been noodling around on 7 of 9 here for the better part of 2 days. Whenever I have any time left over, I've been noodling around on it specifically to answer one question. I've been asking one question the whole time. Now, the main question that I had was, how is it for typing? Am I going to want to type on this thing? No matter what kind of electronic device I get, the number one need I have for it is friendly typing. Because the number one thing I do all day long is type. The number 2 thing after that is reading. And I already know that I love to read on an iPad. And it turns out that the typing on this keyboard is divine. Absolutely divine. And those are the 2 big... those are the 2 big things. And they were fine. Once I got past those 2 things, I started to ask myself, okay, what else can you do on this device that you maybe think you do on other devices, that you maybe think you have to do on other devices? Just go down the list of what you have to do. Like, for instance, typing and reading, fine. But can you file documents on the websites with the editors that you need to do? Yes, I can. Can you conduct Zoom conversations? Zoom is a desktop app. I was wondering, is the latest Apple iOS system, is it compatible with Zoom? It certainly is. You can do a Zoom conversation on this machine, no problem. Exactly the same as if it were on a desktop. I thought filming, because that's why I'm filming on this iPhone now, to show you this. But I got the iPhone and bought a $3 tripod for it because it was the thing I filmed on. Not the thing I wrote on, not the thing I read on, but the thing I filmed on. And the thing I wrote on was different from the thing I read on. I didn't read on a laptop. And you can see what I mean. That starts to multiply devices. So I tried filming on this. I've had nothing but positive responses from all of you. The camera is just fine. The YouTube tech channels all said the camera is terrible. They use the terrible phraseology that it's like filming on a potato. And speaking as a Donoghue from 15 generations of Donohues, I have to say, what, pray tell, is wrong with filming on a potato? All parts of life are better with potatoes. But I tried it. I didn't make any fanfare out of it. I just tried it, and it turns out it works just fine to film and upload videos. And it has an enormous amount of storage, so that's never going to be a problem. Another device down. That's another device down. All the apps work just fine on this. I have there is now, as far as I can tell, one holdout. There's one thing. You know how when you're reformatting, when you get a new device and you suddenly have to sign into all of your accounts, you know what a headache that can be. Because suddenly you realize that you don't know your login information for some website that you use every day because you haven't changed it in years and you've never moved off your machine in years. I had headaches with that at first on this device with a whole bunch of things. I solved them all one after another, except for the Kindle app. The Amazon Kindle app just won't let me in. It just won't do it. I need to figure that out because every eGalley that I get from NetGalley goes to that Kindle app. So, but I absolutely have to be able to make that work. I just haven't quite done it yet. I will. It's the last thing. And that's why I wanted to show you this, because I really do think that this is the device that I will simply use for everything from now on. The case is wonderful. Barely adds any weight, and whoever thought up that design to fold the keyboard inside the thing is a genius. And so it's fine for all of what the YouTube channels call productivity, but it's also fine for everything else that you typically use an iPad for. You can just watch stuff on it, scroll through social media on it. So That's your tech update, is that I think this is my tech for quite some time. I'm pretty sure that's the thing I'm going to use. And I just wanted to let you know that in case any of you are actually interested in these tech updates. I have been saying for years on this channel that I'd really like one device to rule them all, and I think I've actually found it. I think that's true. I think I found it. I think the next step I will take with this thing will not be getting some 10-year-old iPad or an old Chromebook or anything like that. I think those days are over. I think the next step I will do with this is to explore the Apple Pencil. The first generation Apple Pencil is supported on this thing and works just fine. And there are plenty of free art apps. Even without art apps, it might be nice to be able to digitally sign a document without needing to find somebody with a working printer, print it out, sign it, then scan it, and then send that back. But a bunch of other things too. There's an art element of this device that was intentionally highlighted in the construction of the device that I don't use it for at all, and that seems like a waste. I think that'll be the next thing I do, but your tech update for now, probably your last tech update, is how good this is. How fantastic it is. Turns out that those of you who have been cheesing me for years about how, rather than spend $70, $60, $50 here and there on old Chromebooks and old MacBooks and old iPads, maybe what you ought to do is pool that money over time and spend a lump of money, larger money, on a newer product that will necessarily be better. You may have been right. Those of you who said that may have been right. The next item that I want to talk about here is connected with a video. If I remember, I'll leave a link to it down below. Jason Harrigan at Byways and Bookland, a name that I mention often on this channel, a fellow member of the OGBG, went out book shopping. He didn't say so in his video, but he's had a head cold, a rather bad, one of those miserable it sounds like one of those miserable head colds where it's bad enough to make you feel absolutely miserable, but you don't have the benefit of complaining about it because it's just a head cold. And it sounds to me like he decided to engage in a little book shopping therapy to make himself feel better, went out book hunting, and came across a bunch of books. I'll leave a link to the video. He shows a bunch of stuff, but two of the books really struck home for me, made me smile when I saw them, because they are two books from this little book room, which is my sanctum sanctorum. This is the place that my books, and I like to think all other books in the world, dream of ending up. Not necessarily just here, but you know what I mean. A big, well-stocked personal library that is poured over, that isn't there for visual effect, but that is poured over lovingly. That's where all books dream of ending up, whether it's mine or anybody else's such library. And two of the books that Jason found in his book jaunt were that kind. They are in this room. I want to show them to you and recommend them. The first is this particular edition of The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. This is Tolkien's Legendarium. This is his the enormous Old Testament style backdrop, pseudo-mythological backdrop to The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. So when a character like Aragorn in Lord of the Rings stops and tells and sings a long song about Beren and Luthien or the old kings of Gondor or whatever, here we get the stories of them, and it's told in a very different way from Lord of the Rings. There's comparatively very little spoken dialogue, because this is more of a big, detailed, sweeping chronicle, very poetically written, with some absolutely beautiful passages. And when the focus does narrow down from the massive events of the whole of the world to individual dramas, it's fantastic. Every single time that it does that, it's fantastic. The Silmarillion will be on a lot of people's radars far more prominently than it ever has been right now, and for the last 50 years it's been sort of a treat for Tolkien fans. But I have a feeling that a lot of people are going to know it in 2021 that didn't know it before, because the Silmarillion is going to be the quarry from which the TV miniseries about Lord of the Rings is mined. I have a feeling that TV miniseries will still use the term Lord of the Rings. It won't be Middle-earth. It'll be Lord of the Rings, which means that one of the main characters will be Sauron when the Rings of Power are being forged. I don't know. Maybe the TV series will focus on the Silmarils, the actual putative subject of a long narrative line that runs throughout here. But one way or another, I'm hoping that if that TV series ever is made, and if it becomes popular, I'm hoping that more people will discover this book, because it's amazing. And it was a showstopper. I just chortled out loud when I saw Jason actually hold up this edition, because I love this edition. And talk about editions that I love, he also held up this. Seven Pillars of Wisdom now. He found an edition in much better shape than mine, but this is Lawrence of Arabia's great narrative of his time helping the Arab Revolt, and his pen portraits of all of the people that he met and all of the experiences that he had, including some dicey experiences, lots of action narration, and his thoughts all throughout. And this is a very rare instance. Lawrence of Arabia himself is fairly rare. I've often commented that I think he may be the last figure in history to have his own prepositional phrase. Right, we have lots of others. There are lots before him, but in I think the 21st century largely did away with them. I know that the British General Montgomery kind of wanted and was often very flattered when people referred to him as Montgomery of El Alamein, but I don't think it took. Whereas T.E. Lawrence is better known as his own name, Lawrence of Arabia, than he is by any actual birth certificate type stuff. And I think that's fascinating because this is a rare confluence where the person who has that kind of distinction also wrote a towering classic. This book is a towering classic of almost unclassifiable English prose. One of the great nonfiction works in the English language. Regardless of how much you know about the Arab Revolt or about World War I or about the state of the Middle East in Lawrence's day, regardless of that, it's not. I wanted to double down to stress what Jason, the overview that Jason gave you, that this is not what it might appear. You might look at this and think, okay, well, I've seen other books on Lawrence of Arabia and on the events of the time, and this will just be his version. And that can make it sound bloodless. And certainly every single British officer of the line wrote their own memoirs of this time, and all of those books are bloodless. But this is something else again. This is mystical. This is keep in mind, Lawrence was a translator of Homer, and boy, oh boy, does it show in this book. This is a towering work of literature, not just a memoir of one troublemaker, for the British Empire. So I when I saw this edition, I was overjoyed. I just cheered because it's in this room. I have a couple of paperback editions, but this is the one that I go back to over and over again because, as Jason showed you in his video, this is illustrated all throughout. I have bookmarks all throughout here. I have all sorts of pulled book reviews of any kind, one way or another. They all go in here rather than anywhere else. And it has stayed true that even when I've read every biography of Lawrence of Arabia. The official biography is enormous. I've read all the unofficial biographies, including one that is a vicious hatchet job. I've read all the studies of Lawrence, with Lawrence in Arabia and all that sort of stuff. I've read the dumb books. Michael Korda's book, A Modern Hero, is kind of dumb. And one of the hallmarks, I think, of whether or not a book like this still retains its magic, still retains its power, is if you prefer it to all of those later books. And I do. I go back to this a million times. I don't think I've even kept most of those others. I have a shelf of Lawrence of Arabia biographies. I'll go back to them if I'm writing there are regular books on Lawrence of Arabia, so I've written about him a few times for audiences, but I will check those books when I do. But invariably, I end up going back to Seven Pillars of Wisdom more because it's just an essential book. So I'm not going to make a habit of. I promise I won't make a habit of doing these footnotes to other people's book hauls. But I saw those and I wanted to stress them again in your minds. If you're a Tolkien fan and you haven't read the Silmarillion, you're missing a treat. And no matter who you are, no matter what you're a fan of, if you haven't read Seven Pillars of Wisdom, you ought to give it a try. There have been many, many editions, so it shouldn't be hard to find one. It doesn't have to be this gorgeous thing that now Jason and I both have. That is so weird. A copy of this is sitting in two different libraries, thousands of miles apart from each other. And for all I know, I'm trying off the top of my head to remember if Mark Richardson has this exact volume. Does Sean Standfast have this volume? Not just Seven Pillars of Wisdom, but this edition? I don't know. Probably they do. Buried somewhere. But anyway, that's sort of a book second vote. And then we have one package, and it's from Amazon. And I haven't sent anything. I haven't ordered anything from Amazon, so I don't know who this comes from. It could be from one of you. It could be a gift from one of you. Yeah, it is. It's a gift. Please enjoy this complimentary copy of the first long-form work of literary fiction inspired by 2020's events. Okay, sent from the author. So this is a novella by John Pistelli, who holds a PhD in English from the University of Minnesota, and is the author of Portraits and Ashes and the novella Ecstasy of Michaela. And he runs an award-winning literary blog at johnpistelli.com. I didn't know that literary blog. I will have to bookmark it. And this is The Quarantine of St. Sebastian House. Very dire, blood-red cover. Let's find out what we have here. A global pandemic has America under quarantine. In a rundown apartment building with nowhere to go and nothing to do, 5 people, a philosopher, an academic, a filmmaker, a sculptor, and a philanthropist, come together at first only for the pleasure of company. But then they find themselves in a ferocious debate about the obsessions that drive their lives and a ruthless quest to discover the secrets that brought them together. Their passions and betrayals play out against the dangerous backdrop of a state-enforced lockdown and a disease that can strike anyone at any time. The eventually explosive conflicts among these poor artists, underfed intellectuals, and desperate fanatics pose urgent questions of art and inequality, health and freedom, faith and power, love and death. I'm pretty sure you're hooked by now. I certainly am. The Quarantine of St. Sebastian House is at once a platonic dialogue, a poem in prose, and a suspenseful story of mystery and romance, a fresh narrative for a new era. A fresh narrative for a new era, and yet I'd be willing to bet that a lot of you felt the same echo that I did, which is the Decameron. People isolated and sequestered by a plague, reduced to telling stories with all sorts of tensions simmering underneath. Okay, well, you know as well as I do that 2021 is going to be all pandemic all the time when it comes to books. How odd it would be in 2021. How odd it would be to have a high-profile new literary fiction release where the characters don't wear masks, where they don't talk about it. It's going to be another one of those stalking horses of contemporary literature. How much do you allow in modernity? And can you allow in modernity without making modernity the subject of the story? Remember, we've talked many times on this channel about how murder mystery authors and thriller authors especially have a distinct penchant for setting their mysteries in a time before cell phones, before the internet, as a just preemptive way of solving a lot of their own problems, because all of that stuff throws gigantic wrinkles into the normal procedure of a murder mystery, of holding back clues, of discovering things. Imagine what 90% of the Golden Age murder mysteries would be like if every single person in the story could instantly Google every other person in the story. Imagine 90% of those stories would evaporate like morning dew. And modern authors know that. So they leave those conveniences out. They leave those aspects of modernity out. Look at all the literary fiction that we see that's set in the 80s or the early 90s or something like that. And the authors make, at the 92nd Street Y, they make highfalutin noises about how really the attacks on September 11 were terminus ad quo. But really, it's just that they don't want characters talking on the phone all day long. And they realize that scrolling through iPhones has effectively made zombies out of most of the people that they know. So they're reaching back into ye olden days. And you have to think what effect that's going to have on the 21st century, on the year 2021. New books, new literary fiction novels. Will they be in a world of pandemic? Will they be in a world of face masks? And not being able to go out and about in public, or it being a political gesture if you do? That is the world now. I wonder how that will reflect in the books that we see. There's going to be a tsunami of them. Not just fiction, of course, nonfiction. Oh my God, I don't even want to think about the nonfiction list. They'll all be pandemic memoirs. All of them will be. But this is, I'm not 100% sure of the author's claim in his note that this is the first, but it's certainly the first I've ever encountered. It's certainly early out of the starting gate. I think there was a nonfiction book. Didn't Fareed Zakaria write something about, publish a real fast book about the nature of life in the pandemic? But that was nonfiction. This is different. This is the first pebble in that avalanche. And I'm curious to read it now. Fantastic. And this is self-published, is that right? Yeah, this looks like it's self-published. Okay, well, this is just this is just 120 pages, something like that. So I will read this today. So there you go. Well, John Pistelli, I'm assuming that you watch my channel. You wouldn't know to send this to me. If you do watch my channel and you're watching now, thank you. Your book sounds fascinating, so I will give it a look. I'm hoping, if it sounds fascinating to the rest of you, I'm hoping that this is up on Amazon and everywhere else where you can get ebooks. And if John Pistelli doesn't watch this channel, if he maybe came across me through Open Letters or the Washington Post or whatever, well, then in his absence, we will say, didn't this sound interesting? It sounds like a combination of a pandemic thriller and a 21st century update of the Decameron, swapping stories and life experiences while in isolation from a plague. So I can't wait. Great. So there we go. That is your MegaStuff video. I feel like the cat's breakfast, and yet this went over 20 minutes. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.